All right, so this is what we've got for lesson one, cake. And we're doing a traditional sponge. So I thought I'd just make a recipe now. It's exactly what we're doing tomorrow. All the ingredients are the same. So I've got my tins for the sponges and they're already greased. Just going to place them under my bench. You'll be doing the same. And then the ingredient pool for this sponge, and it's on page number 10 of our notes, and it's called a Genoese sponge. So we've got essentially a few different types of sponges. We've got a traditional conventional sponge, we've got an emulsified sponge, and then we have a sponge which is a traditional sponge, but then it has butter folded through it at the end, right, which makes it a little bit richer, longer shelf life, a bit more difficult, easier to decorate for sure, but that's called a Genoese. So now we've got ingredients. I've got my eggs, and they are at 26 degrees. I've warmed them up. The recipe calls for 23 degrees. This is what we call a cold foaming method. Sugar, baker's flour, and cornstarch. So I'm cutting that baker's flour with cornstarch to make a softer flour, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in related theory about flour and flour strength. And then I've got the butter and everything like that. So step number one, sugar and the eggs. They go together. And give that a bit of a mixed fry, put it on the machine to make sure that there's no sugar fall on the bottom. And we're going to whip this at top speed until we reach a very thick, full volume foam. So this type of sponge has no baking powder, so it's mechanically aerated. So now, while that's whipping, I've already got my tins prepared, right, which is really important. And make sure that everything is prepared, because once this sponge comes off the machine and we start to fold through the flour, yeah, you've got to have your oven ready, you've got to have your tins ready. You really don't have a lot of time with this type of sponge. It needs to be made, and it needs to go into the cake tin, and then it needs to be baked straight away. There's really essentially, because it's got no baking powder, and we're just relying on that, on the physical mechanical aeration. So we're mechanically putting bubbles to the air into it. It's like a souffle. You know, we whip it up, and if we don't follow through with the other steps, it will deflate. If we've got an emulsified sponge, which has an emulsifier added to it, and you've got a whole, like you've got a lot of time to be able to, you know, make mistakes, grease and tin stuff. This one's done to be very organised. So I've got my flour here, and I'm going to pre-melt the butter. So I've got unsalted butter with vanilla. So in the microwave with the butter, I've got it in a plastic bowl, and I've just hit the 20-second function on that microwave. And we want to be able to, I want the butter to stay as butter. What I mean is that don't heat the butter to a boiling point or in a situation where the butter will separate. I want the butter to stay as butter. And there's also a temperature consideration with this too, is that we don't want to put something really hot into this foam. We want to make sure that all the ingredients that we're adding in there are either room temperature or they've been conditioned to their optimal temperature. Just while that is whipping, I'm also going to show how to line a double-ended tray for our Swiss roll. So the things that we're making for this lesson is we're making a traditional sponge mix, a conventional sponge, and then we've got this Swiss roll sponge as well. And this will be filled with lemon curd, strawberries rolled up and then presented. The traditional sponge will go into a cake form, where we'll decorate with strawberries and like a jelly on the top. So I'm using this stuff, which is commercial tray tin release agent. The brand of it is Tin Max, but essentially it's not like butter and it's not like the spray. It's just a little bit more suitable for the types of things that we're doing. Using butcher's paper, and here's the half tray. Just folding the butcher's paper in half. And position the tray so that I've got a gap. I've got paper evenly on each side. Make a cut. I'm just going to mark on the outside of the tray. While the tray is down, going to grease the tray. So just around the sides, and let's do a cross in the centre. See the markings on the paper? It's going to make folds where those lines are. And those folds that I made are what I traced on the outside of the tray. That way this paper will fit perfectly into the tray. So I've got the creases on each side. Then I'm just going to cut on that crease, and I'm just going to cut past that little point where the corners meet. On my tray. That's a position so you can see. And then all I need to do is line this paper in. I fold those tags on the inside so they don't interfere with the sponge. So I've just got a nice, very neat papered half. or the Swiss roll. So now I've got like a nice form that's not, the sponge is not going to catch in the corners, and that will be baked for the Swiss roll. So this is the egg foam, and that has had 5 minutes on top speed. So essentially what I've done with the eggs and the sugar is that there's a few things that's happened. I've aerated, so it's mechanically aerated, it's got volume. The eggs, the yolk, which has less of them, the white has water and protein. Those two things have combined, they're emulsified, and I've melted, the sugar's melted. The sugar has done its function to create air bubbles, to help create air bubbles, and now it's melted. Because we can't have unmelted crystals, sugar crystals in a cake batter that are going to bake. They'll just burn in a lot of tiny brown specks. You will probably see some of those spots. So essentially what I've got here is, I would call it a full volume foam, but it's not a even foam, meaning I've got a lot of different sizes of air bubbles. When I use Top Gear, it just creates lots of air bubbles within the foam. Now I want a consistent foam. Might lose a little bit of volume, but the air bubbles are all the same. That means my sponge will rise even. And of course, the resistance from the foam when I fold through these ingredients will just be a bit more resilient. So I'm going to give 2 minutes on second speed. Now I've got scraper, which I need. I've got my sieve and the flour, which I'm going to sieve directly into that sponge. And then I've got the melted butter. Sure, and I've got the vanilla in there as well, vanilla paste. And just a reminder with the sponges and the cakes and the biscuits, if there's no vanilla in the recipe, you need to add something like vanilla, lemon zest, some salt. It's like think about it like a chef when they're preparing food, they season the food, right? Like chips and salt, for example. It's the same for us in patisserie. We use flavorings, vanilla, lemon, orange rind. There needs to be something other than just eggs, sugar, and flour. So that's now had 5 minutes top speed and 2 minutes second speed. So I'll have a stable foam. So I'm just going to take the foam off the whisk. Make sure I get everything. And this is one of those tasks where we are using our hands. When I start folding, I'm going to use a cup hand and I will cup down to the bottom of the knuckle. And as I lift up, I'm going to shake. That's to break up the flour. So I'll do that now, and you'll see it a little bit clearly tomorrow. But this sponge, it takes some practice, right? So I've got my flour, sieve it through, directly on top. Sieving it because I want it to be floating on the top. But the other thing is I've got cornstarch and flour. Whenever I'm mixing ingredients together, was a good idea for this. So that flour now is just sitting on the top. I've got my butter, but I'm going to start folding first before I add the butter. So this is where I'm going to scoop down lift and fold and do a bit of a shake to break up the flour. So lift, shake. You see that I turn the bowl as I move around. So pick up, give it a shake, get that flour broken up. Don't want it to stick to the bottom. And now I'm just folding through. You see that it's sort of mostly, it's not clear, but it's nearly all clear. So now I'm going to add the butter. Attach the sponge. I'm going to blend that together. This way, I don't have liquid butter just falling down to the bottom of the bowl. It's mixed. The two mixtures now are compatible. So I add that. Now I'm going to blend those two together. And again, now I'm not lifting, I'm not doing that shaping now, I'm just folding over. So you can have not enough mixing and you can have too much mixing. If you've got too much mixing, that's when it just deflates. It's a little bit like effervescence, like you just see all the bubbles come to the top and you've got essentially like a pancake. So now I have my sponge. Now I want to dispense that into the cake tins. So place your cake tins onto a set of scales, right? So underneath this tray is a set of scales. I can now weigh directly into the cake tins and I can manage the weight of these tins. For this, you've got two options. If you've got no experience, the best thing to use is a bowl. So I can carefully scoop up the sponge mix, use my hand still, and then dispense the cake mixture. A good indication for these types of sponges is wherever you get that sponge to, whatever the height is, whatever the volume is, that's where you end up with. It doesn't, we're not getting any more height because it's a mechanically aerated sponge. It will souffle up and it'll collapse back down to the size that it is now. I'm going to go 200. These are smaller cake tins, so I'm going to go 250. Use the tear button so I can get the other one. So now I've got my two sponges that I really need to get to the oven ASAP, right? But I'm going to show you now the Swiss roll. I have enough time to do that without those sponges deflating. My oven's ready. This also has a weight. I'm going to add that sponge now. Dispense that into the tray. Use my scraper now to get the rest of the sponge out. To get the right weight. And I'll give you those weights tomorrow. So the tool that's used for this task is called a crank handle pellet knife. The goal is to get this sponge mix evenly distributed through the tray. We don't want a sponge that is, shallow and deep because we're going to roll this up. It needs to be, as best you can, consistently flat. The technique that I use is I work from corner to corner. So I'm going to pick up this mix and use my pellet knife. I've got a finger on the top, right? And I'm going to push that sponge over to the one side and then push that into the corner. This technique is really useful for not just sponges, but I use this for nearly all batters and ganaches where I need to pin that out at a really accurate depth. So I've done 2 corners now. Now I'll push the mixture across and I'm going to work to that other corner there. And then I just move more mixture across to keep it even and work on that last one. And then just make sure it's even. Put up the last bit. And that is the sponge dispense for the sponge roll and the sponges for the sponge rounds. This is a recipe that we'll be doing also in the assessment. Okay, so I thought it had some value for you just to have a look at this before class tomorrow, but you might also use this for a review on the assessment.